Alright, in this project we're going to be making a magazine cover, and we're going to be using an image of Patrick Mahomes as our subject matter, and we're going to create a background and then add some text. We're going to start with a new project that is standard paper size. So if you choose the print category here and then choose 8.5 by 11, that will get you started with the correct dimensions in inches, 8.5 by 11, and the pixel density 300 pixels per inch. And go ahead and click create. I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly just so you get the general idea of what the goals are for this assignment. So the first thing you want to do is open and place an image. You can get this from the Google Classroom. I chose this image for a number of reasons, specifically because it is rather difficult to pick the foreground and eliminate the background, which is one of our main goals for this project, is how do you do that and get some good results, specifically the hair region where there's like a very rough edge with a lot of detail where you're not sure, if it's not selected somewhat, it's going to look very unnatural. So we need to have a detailed selection made. But this resolution is not very great. If you zoom in, you can start to see the pixels. So the resolution of the image that we're starting with is not as good as I would like it to be, but sometimes that's the case, and so this is just a more challenging image to select detail in. That's another reason why I chose this image. It'll give us an opportunity to really challenge ourselves. Alright, so let's get started. What we want to do is use the quick select tool. So it has to analyze the image for a little bit. And then at the top, this is a brush tool, so you have the option for brush size and hardness. I like to use a smaller brush to begin with and see what happens. And if it's too chunky, like it selects too little bit at a time, then you can increase the size of the brush. So I'm going to start with a smaller brush to see what happens. And click to start selecting. And already it's selected way too much. I'm going to undo that just to show you. If I were to click on a smaller area with a smaller brush, it's going to just select little chunks at a time. So if you want to have larger chunks, you would increase the size of your brush. And even with just that little bit of an increase, it selected all of this stuff. So from this point, I can see there's a lot of stuff that has been selected that I don't want selected. I found that the more you use this tool, the better your selection becomes over time, because it learns what is foreground and what is background, what am I trying to select and what am I not trying to select. So at the top you have the option to add to selection, which is unite, or subtract, remove from the selection. So I'm going to go to the minus symbol and then remove some stuff that's been selected that I don't want selected. And then it deselected too much, but I'm going to go back in and use the plus to unite more, add more to the selection. And there I've included the face. I'm going to try to go up into the hair, and again I've got a little too much background. So I'm going to, instead of going up here back and forth all the time, I'm going to use my Alt key. If I press Alt, it toggles between minus and plus. So I'm going to hold Alt down and then paint over what I want to remove. So that I got that. Now I'm going to add the hair and just maybe a little bit more. Oh, that's too much. So now I need to hold the Alt key down and remove some of the background. Alright, so that's a pretty good area there. I need to fix some stuff in the background here. And let me use the hand tool and move down here. Again, I'm removing some of this background from the selection. And then one more spot over here. If I zoom in, you can see a little spot here. I'm going to switch tools just to show you. Sometimes at this point, instead of trying to continue using the quick select tool that might deselect too much, I'm going to switch to the lasso tool. And now I have a little bit more control. I'm going to subtract. So I'm using this lasso tool in the subtract mode. And I'm going to draw along the body here. And because it's clothing, it doesn't matter if it's perfect. It's going to look like the edge of clothing. And then I'm going to encircle what was selected too much of the background. So, and then that will remove it. There's going to be another section, I believe, up here. Let's see what's going on here in the face. Yeah, there's a little bit here that's a little bump out from the ear. So I'm going to use the lasso tool again and subtract. Draw along the edge of the ear and then draw a circle around what I want to remove. So it's like cutting this out. So now I have a pretty good selection. I'm going to go to the second spot. There's a little section here. Let me zoom in. Well, that's not too bad. But let's just go ahead and change to the Unite. Just say you wanted to add something to it. So I'm going to go ahead and draw along here and then circle inside to add that little area to the selection. That's just an example of how you can use the lasso tool to kind of fine-tune after you've made a selection. Here's a little section here on the arm. I'm going to make a circle around that real quickly. Alright, now we're ready to move on to the next part, which is how do you refine a selection and get more detail up here in the hair. Now I want to click on Refine Edge, which I believe shows up in any selection tool. After you've made a selection, you have the option to refine the edge. So find that button and click on it. This will bring up a new work area, and I'll explain how this works. It takes a little bit of time for it to load. Alright, here on the left, or on the right rather, you see the result. If I were to just click OK, it would load this, my original selection, into a new layer. And then on the left we have our original image, and everything that has been selected is ghosty white. Everything that's not selected is slightly darker than the original, so it's hidden. And then around the border there's a 3 pixel area around the edge. You can see it here along the ear, where some of this is in question. So over here on the face, that's definitely white. That is for sure foreground. Over here where it's darker, that's for sure background. But along the transition there's some gray area. And that's where we're allowing the Photopea software to decide what is foreground and what is background. And over here in the results, you could see some of the fleshy tones were cut out, and then some of the background appears. So this is a good area to focus on to see how these tools work. Here's my brush, and obviously it's too large zoomed in, so I'm going to reduce the brush size here. And let's go a little bit smaller. What I want to do is, if I want for sure something to be included in the foreground or visible, I'm going to paint with white, just like I would in a mask. So I'm going to paint these skin tones with white to tell Photopea this is definitely foreground. Do not question this. Do not try to replace it with something else. And it's going to reanalyze the photo after I painted that. So now you can see in the results a lot more of the ear has appeared. There's a little bit more of the red tones of the background, so I could go in with black and tell it this is definitely background, don't include that little spot right there. And it's going to reanalyze the image, and it removed that. So right away you can see that's a lot cleaner. Up here I have a little bit of foreground that I want to make sure is included. I'm going to go ahead and paint that with white. So there's a little tiny spot. Again, it reanalyzed everything after I painted that. and it just continues to refine the edge according to what you've painted, that is foreground, and what you have painted out with black, which is background, and it makes a more intelligent choice. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and tackle the hair at the top. Okay, you can see the results are really jagged around here. This is my original selection. So I'm going to go ahead and use the brush tool and call into question more of this stuff up here. So it's going to reanalyze the image and try to add more detail to the hair. First, what I can do is help it by saying some areas are definitely hair. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this in. This is definitely hair. So you'll see that pop up in the preview over here on the right. There it is. And this little section here is definitely hair. There are no visible areas of the background in that area. So I'm just helping it out before we start calling more stuff into question. And then over here, it looks like there's too much of the background, so I'm going to go ahead and paint that out. You can see that disappear in just a second. Okay, now I'm going to start painting with gray. And I want my brush size to be large enough to include some of these wisps that are out here. So I'm going to increase the size. That looks pretty good. Right now I'm going to start painting along the transition. Actually, that's a little too big. Let me go down a little bit. Say right there. I should be painting with gray, hopefully. So again, I'm just painting along the edge to call into question some of these. It's going to reanalyze and say, does this look like background material or does this look like foreground material? And should I reveal these pixels or should I hide them? And in just a second, we're going to see the results. This is all one long brush stroke. You can do individual ones, but after each stroke, it's going to reanalyze. So I generally like to make one broad stroke, so it'll process everything at the same time. And here are some of the results. So from this point, I can use the black and the white to refine this. I'm going to start with the black because I see this section over here that doesn't look like it's hair. So I'm going to go ahead and paint that out with black. You'll see after I make this small edit, it's going to reanalyze the entire image. And let's go ahead and remove more there. Give it a second to process. Now let's try to, that looks pretty good, but some of this area up in here, these highlights are just too intense. So I need to help it out a little bit. I'm going to paint a little bit what the hair tones should be, and it's going to reanalyze the image. And then along this transition, it really looks too jaggedy, so I'm going to go ahead and paint that in a little bit more with white. I have this little section over here. So again, it's a bit of a dance, painting in and out until you get the right results that you're looking for. And this to me looks decent. I'm still struggling with this background over here on the right hand side. Whoops, I wanted to do with black. That's going to really mess things up for a second. Okay, let me paint this out. Alright, I think I really like this. I'm might analyze a little bit more of that just with the gray. Alright, that looks really good. I'm going to go ahead and see it on a dark background, and that actually looks really nice. You can see the highlights and the darker areas, the shadows, and it looks a lot more natural. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out so you can see. When you zoom out, you can really tell it looks a lot better than our original selection, and for the quality of image that it is, it's really decent. Now we're ready to start talking about how do I want to add this to my project now that I'm done with the work. There are 3 different options. You can choose to load this as a new layer, and what it will just be pixels. So there will be no way to add more of the background later. So you really need to be satisfied with it to save it as a new layer. Your other option is to add it as a mask. So anything that's visible will be in a white tones, anything that's hidden will be black in the mask. That will give you the ability to add or remove details later on if you want to. And then you can add it just as a selection, so basically just refining your original selection and including some more of the hair details in the selection. So I'm going to choose to add it as a raster mask, which will hide the background, but will also give me the ability to edit it later on if I want to add or remove things from the image. So here's my result on a plain white background. At this point I want to just resize to scale it to fit on the paper and place it towards the bottom so it makes a little bit more sense. So about right there. Now what I want to do is create a background for myself, and I'm going to use a blank layer. So down here in the layers panel, if you click on the new layer button, it will create a new layer. You can use that button, or you can choose from the layers tab at the top, hover over new, and then choose layer, and there's also a shortcut combination of keys that you can use. So now on my blank layer I'm going to apply a gradient. Now the default foreground and background colors are black foreground and a white background. So I'm just going to use those to show you an example of what a gradient is. Right here towards the middle of the tools list is the gradient tool. The way this works is you click and then drag away as you hold down the click in the direction that you want your gradient to be applied. So this is an example of it being applied up from the bottom to the top. You can also go from the left to the right, or you can go diagonal, however direction you want it to be. This is a linear gradient. There are also radial, angled, reflected, and diamond shaped. Those are all different kinds of gradient. They're just different shapes. We're just going to use the linear to create a custom background. So that's how it works, and then the transition depends on the length of the line. So a shorter line is going to transition very quickly from one color to the next. So the longer line will, distance-wise, it will happen over the length of the line. So a longer line has a more gradual transition over distance. Shorter line is more, it just transitions quickly. So with that in mind, you can customize this by choosing a custom foreground and background color. So I'm going to choose a brownish red, and then let's go with a lighter gray, like a medium gray, and I'm going to go ahead and apply this from the bottom to the top. And then, so this is my custom background. I'm going to go ahead and drag this to be the background layer, so underneath my subject matter. And then the next thing we're going to do is add a title for our magazine. For this, I'm going to use a custom text. So I downloaded a text from the internet. To access that, you need to be in the type tool, and then click on where your current font name is, and you can click on load font. My new font is already loaded in, I can see it, so I'm just showing you the steps to get to that place. So if you downloaded a font, you would find it, click on it, and open it. I've already done that, so mine's in here now. And then you can search to find that custom font, if you remember the name of it. So mine's called News of the World, which is one that emulates the Sports Illustrated font. So now I'm going to type my text, and if I click anywhere, it's going to place my cursor, and I can just begin typing. And it's very hard to see because the font size in relation to the paper is very small. So it's hard to even see there that I've created text. I'm going to double click my text layer, and that selects all of the text, and now I can increase the size. If you click the arrow next to the size number, you get a little slider which will allow you to increase it up to a certain point, and then it will not increase any more than that. You'll have to use a number value, or if you hover over the word size, you get these arrows. If you click there and scrub to the right, it will increase the size. If you scrub to the left, it will decrease the size. I'm going to increase the size so it's nice and large, and I eventually want this to be 2 lines of text. So I'm going to click in here before my second word, use the backspace to remove the space, and then press enter. Now I have 2 lines of text, but I want to squeeze these 2 lines together. So I'm going to go into the character properties, which is found here in between your work area and your layers panel there. Find the one that has the character options, and what I'm going to be changing is the leading between one line and the next. So I want to decrease that distance. So I'm going to grab that. I want to make sure my text is selected, so double click the text and decrease the leading to squeeze them together until I get it to where I want it to be. And then I can close the properties by clicking on that button again. And then I want it to be centered, so I'm going to do center aligned, and now I'm going to just move it into place using the move tool. I want this text to be a little bit more visible, so I'm going to change it to white. So with my text selected, I can click on the color thumbnail there and change the color to whatever I want it to be. That's it for this project.